Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to be talking about proofing and controls in this webinar. Let's get into it. Uh-oh, I'm already having trouble. There we go. So real quick off the bat, I want to thank everyone, especially Dana Krebling and Dogs of Course, for inviting me to do my first virtual camp presentation. So I'm happy to be here. And then all of my wonderful colleagues and friends and students who have happily given me videos and photos to share with you and run some exercises that I begged and requested them to do. And of course, our video and photo credits. So just want to give a shout out to everybody right off the top so I don't forget. Okay. This thing is not behaving itself. Okay, there we go. Okay, so some topics for today. We're going to talk about what is proofing, what are controls, how and why should I be proofing at all with controls in my nose work training? I'm going to give you some at-home proofing exercises that you can do with your dogs or with your students. And then we're going to have time throughout the webinar for question and answer. So we'll have 3 questions. If you have a burning question, you can submit them on the Q&A, and then we'll pause throughout the webinar and go through those, and I'll answer as many of those as I can. So scent training like a professional. Professional scent detection dogs, trainers use controls and proofing in their training protocols. Why do they do this? Well, they do this to ensure that their working dogs are accurate and reliable in the detection of their trained target odors. So do these same principles apply for sports scent work? And what does it mean to proof your dog? What are controls, and how are they perhaps already present in your training and already in the trials? And maybe you're just not aware of what they are and how you're already encountering them in your training and in your competition life. So let's talk about proofing. What is proofing? The definition of proofing is practicing a desired behavior in different environments and in situations until the dog generalizes the behavior, which means they can perform the behavior in any place and in the presence of any distraction. The 4Ds in dog training are often used by dog trainers to break down the process of proofing. So those 4Ds consist of 1, duration, which is the time which the behavior can be maintained. So how long a dog can do a stay, how long the dog can focus on the handler, right? This is duration, which is amount of time. Then we have distance. This can be the amount of space between the dog and the handler, or in some situations, it's the amount of space between the dog and the stimuli. And what I mean by stimuli is the thing, the event, the object, the person, the other animal in which the dog might be overly interested in or very worried about, something like that. So it could be the distance between the dog and that stimulus, or the dog and the handler. We have distraction, which are what we like to call competing motivators. And really all that is life, right? That's everything that the dog might find intrinsically interesting. Think about squirrels, cars, birds, maybe novel smells, dog pee, things like that. Those would be things that are competing for the dog's attention. So we call those distractors. And then the 4th one is diversity, which is the variety of environments or situations in which the dog can perform this behavior. So those are the things that we're working on in a proofing process. We want the dog to be able to perform through all of these different Ds, and a good trainer breaks them down into small bites. So the dog can really work on each thing individually. We don't want to work on all those things all at the same time. Maybe we focus on one in one session and one in another as we go. Otherwise, we might overload the dog. So pop quiz. All right, Dana, we're going to open up the chat for the pop quiz.
Okay, hang on a sec. Go ahead.
And I want everyone to participate, and don't be shy. There are no wrong answers, really. So the first question, and we just talked about what proofing is. We are basically making a behavior stronger, right, through the 4Ds. So looking at this photo of this young Malinois, what proofing is occurring here? Which of the 4Ds can you observe? And I'll give you time to answer that. Duration, distance. I'm hearing a lot of duration. Of course, we have to make a lot of assumptions based on a still. Diversity, yep. You guys are awesome. All 4. Very possible. Now, the distance one's a little tricky to me. The handler's very close to the dog. I'm not sure if they're working on distance to the dog and the handler, but we also don't know what's going on in that environment. What distractions or competing motivators happen to be there? That's box store. So who knows? There's customers walking around. There's probably heavy equipment moving. So definitely we're working on some distraction. Distractions of smells, 100%. Yes, absolutely. Right. Okay. Good. All right. Now, not behaving itself. There we go. How about this one? The next photo on your right. Are they the same as the previous photo? So we have another dog, appears to be working on a downstay, definitely distraction with an exclamation point. I think it's hilarious. And I didn't notice when I first put this photo up that she spelled out leave it with the toys. I don't know if you guys saw that either. It took me a couple times to look at it. So those are this dog's favorite toys. So 100% working on distraction training. And to me, I would say probably some distance, right? Where's the trainer? I just saw that exactly. How far away is the trainer? So we know the minute the handler is moving farther away from those distractors, right? We are increasing the distance and we're probably upping the distraction, right? Because the dog's like, how fast can I get to that toy before my handler, right? They're doing the math. So great. Excellent. Okay, we can close the chat there. Thanks for playing, everybody. So, how does this apply to nose work? What is proofing in nose work? How do the 4Ds relate? Recall, proofing means practicing a desired behavior in different environments and in different situations until the dog generalizes the behavior. Is this starting to sound a little familiar? When you started nose work, if you started with canine nose work, 9 times out of 10, you started your dog with food or a toy with the good old boxes. And what did your trainer tell you to do? Put those boxes in your car, take them everywhere you go, everywhere that you go with your dog, get those boxes out, whether it's at a park, at a parking lot, at a grocery store, in Home Depot, which is a box store if you don't know, any places, your friend's house, the garage, maybe the library parking lot, which is where I am sort of right now. So starting to sound a lot like the 4Ds, right? We're working on a ton of distraction, duration, how long can the dog maintain that search in a new environment, and distance, right? Maybe the dog's working a bigger scent problem. Maybe the boxes aren't so close together and you're starting to spread them out. That's how it relates. So also in scent work, proofing is a training technique utilized to ensure that the dog ignores all odors except the trained odor. And this is what I really want to get into here. So here's an example of proofing in nose work. So let's talk about blank containers. Is that not a proofing exercise? So if a dog is not rewarded for and possibly discouraged from responding to elements that are often associated with a trained target odor, like a container, maybe it's a box, maybe in this case it's a toolbox, that would be an example of proofing in nose work. Okay. What are controls? Let's talk about controls. We've talked about proofing. Now let's get into controls. A control is an element that remains unchanged or unaffected by other variables. In science, a control is something used as a standard of comparison for checking the results of an experiment. So that would be like if you're doing a clinical trial with maybe a new medication or a new drug. You have one group that's getting the new medication, you have a group that's getting a placebo, and then you have your control, which really don't get any treatment. So they can make a comparison of the control group, which is the constant variable, which is unaffected because we haven't applied any changes to it. And we can compare that to the placebo group and to the group getting the drug. So that would be an example of your control group. Okay, that's the thing. I want you to remember that is the thing that is always there in your training or in your searches. My forward button's not working. Okay. Pop quiz time. All right, let's open the chat up again. I like how bold everybody was in the last one. Uh-oh, Dana?
You're ready to go. I did
Oh
it.
my gosh, you're so fast.
I'm trying.
Okay. I know, you're on it, man. Okay. So let's name a control that you might find in nose work. Remember, odor, is that a control? A control is an element that remains unchanged or unaffected by other variables. Equipment, handler. That handler is a great answer. It is, assuming you're not changing handlers and you're the same handler handling the same dog. And remember that anything that's used in training to present target odor, and when I say target odor or target scent in this webinar, I'm referring to an odor that you've trained your dog is important. That means I'm going to get a cookie or I'm going to get my toy. So that would be birch or anise or clove or cedar. Okay. When I say train target odor, that's what I'm referring to. So it's the thing that is used to present that odor to the dog. A blank, never used tin. Yep. Amount of odor, same odor. Okay, well, not quite. The reward could be a constant variable. Putty, great one. Vessel, yes. Would a car be considered a control? A vehicle? What about start line markers? Can be. Flags. Remember, you always told at trials, don't alert on the flags, don't alert on the flags. Start line routine. Interesting. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Think of anything else? Equipment. Okay. People in the search area. Search queue. People watching. So for the purposes of this webinar, I'm focusing on this stuff. Okay. These are a predictable, constant variable in your training. You have to put the odor in something. Okay. Unless you're putting blank Q-tips out or just naked Q-tips out, they're going to be contained in something and they need to be adhered somehow also. Okay. So we're going to focus on that. Those would be considered your controls. Yeah. Containers like ORT boxes. Absolutely. Okay. We can close the chat. Thanks for playing. Remember, it's a constant variable. It's always there. Are people always watching your search? Not necessarily. Are you always using the same rewards? Maybe not. Okay. All right, so let's do a question and answer because I'm hoping you have some questions. So we can talk about questions regarding proofing, what the heck is a control, anything like that that's come up so far that you might have a question about.
So far, we don't have anyone yet, but we have time. Okay. So guys, let's give them a moment to type things in.
Sure.
We certainly see if anybody else is ready to ask questions yet. If not, we can move on. And here we go. Why is odor not considered a constant?
Because it is the thing that the dog is being proofed to indicate on. It is the target. It is not considered the constant. I mean, sorry, the control.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
I sure can. So when I think about odor, and I consider the fact that, let's talk about birch, because most of us probably started with birch. We have essential oil of birch, right? Which has a lot of VOCs. If you don't know what that is, it's a volatile odor compound, right? That's the thing that is emanating off of that oil that the dog is actually detecting, okay? So we have this oil, the birch. The birch itself is in what do they call that? A vehicle, which is the oil that it's put in, okay? It's infused into an oil. That is then placed on a Q-tip, right? To be offered to the dog, because we don't really want to just put drops of oil all over our search area. We don't want to contaminate it. It's kind of dirty training. We want to put that in something. So whether it's filter paper, a cotton ball, a Q-tip, right? So we infuse those typically in a jar and we get that odor on the Q-tip. Does the Q-tip itself not have its own odor? Right? Everything has smell, everything. Whether you can smell it or not, everything has an odor. That Q-tip is your control, right? Because it is with the target odor. Then I'm going to take the Q-tip and put it into a metal tin. Does the metal tin not have odor? It has its own signature odor. So now I have a metal tin with a Q-tip with the target odor on it. I put that out for the dog. Now, we can't really ask the dog, what part of that scent profile are they actually detecting? Are they actually detecting the birch? Maybe they're detecting the metal tin. If they're always getting their searches with the same type of setup, you don't actually know what they're keying in on. Using glue dots, using tape. That is all part of the whole scent picture for the dog. They're taking in the birch, they're taking in the adhesive, they're taking in the scent vessel, whether it's metal or plastic. And that's like one like soup. If you think about it like a soup, there's a lot of ingredients and it's all these compounds the dog is picking up on, okay? The control are the things that we're teasing out of that. So I want to take that soup and I'm going to remove the Q-tips and I'm going to present the Q-tip all by itself with no other odor, no signature odor other than maybe mine, because I can't help but contaminate everything because I'm a dirty human. That is your control. I want to take that variable out, show it to the dog as a non-rewardable variable, meaning that thing, that Q-tip smell, that's not what we're going after. We're going after birch. So that maybe I take the metal tin out of the equation. The dog notices that. That's not what's paying either. So you're helping the dog to decipher all those smells, to ignore the Q-tip, to ignore the metal tin, to ignore the tape, and focus only on the birch. Does that make sense?
I think it's more, I think it's clearer. So
okay.
I have a couple more questions. Still a little bit of confusion about what the constant would be or the control. Is the manner of reward, like the way I say alert or yes, and deliver the cookie at source, could that be a constant?
It could be a constant, yes. Yes.
And why?
Because it's something that if you're, well, here's the thing, we're never perfect. If you're doing it the same way every time consistently, your marker's the same, your reward is the same, the method that you're offering that thing is the same, you could consider that a control because it's a constant variable. It's always present in your searches, right? So yes, you could consider that a control. But it's hard because we're not perfect, right? Humans our timing's never exactly the same, right? The reward may not always be exactly the same. So there's a little bit of variation there, but you could look at that as a control, yes.
Fantastic. I'm going to give you one more and then we can move on, and we can always come back to this as we continue. Do handlers and dogs both need proofing?
Yes. And I'm going to get into that a little bit. Yes. Yes. Yes, because think about your own proofing, right? I was just at Fest West and I had a lesson with Wendy Kriebel, which was great. And she was asking the handlers questions while we were searching, or like, right, you called the alert and then she'd ask you a math problem. And all the handlers were like, you know, asking like the square root of 9. And it just was enough to throw the handler off. So I would consider that a bit of a proofing exercise. Can the handler work through stress? Can the handler work through pressure? Can the handler work through someone asking them a question in the middle of another activity, right? I would consider that definitely a proofing exercise, okay? I'm gonna explain how proofing and controls work together because I know why you're all confused. You talk about proofing a lot with like food distractors and things like that. That is, yes, proofing. All of that is proofing, but I want to talk about what a control is. So it'll get clearer in a minute. Okay, I'm glad that you're a little confused because it'll get cleared up soon. Okay.
Sounds great. I'm going to let you continue.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, your secret word while we're stopped, for those of you who need CEUs, is control. It's not just a Janet Jackson song. Anyone knows that song? Am I showing my age? So everybody have that? Control is your secret word for those of you who need that. Good? Moving on?
Yes, okay. Go ahead, move on.
All right, so let's talk about it. What about those darn distractors that everybody hates in their containers? Okay, this is Marcella and Grace. They're doing a little practice session with a container drill, pretty standard. She has 3 hides, they're known. She's got distractors, they are food and dog toys. Is this proofing? Yes, absolutely. Again, remember, proofing is asking the dog to maintain a behavior in spite of distractions. In this case, the distractions are food and dog toys. I want the dog to only respond to the trained odor. In this case, I think she had anise, birch, and clove. So yes, this is definitely a proofing exercise, but those are not technically considered controls. because you do not always have potato chips in your search. You don't always have a dog toy in your search. You don't always have saltine crackers or whatever is being used. Those are variables. They're not consistent, okay? They are distractors, but not controls. This is very important training. We all know that. The dogs need to work through distractions like this. Is this valuable training? 100%, but this is a whole nother webinar. Okay, I'm not going to talk about distractors in this webinar, but I want to kind of clear it up for you, the difference of what I'm talking about. And the reason why I want to get it clear about what a control is I think they should be used in nose work training. Okay, and I'm going to show you why. So a couple of the benefits that working with controls are in nose work. So one of them would be it will result in odor fluency. And when I say odor fluency, when you think of being fluent in a language, say Spanish, when you're fluent in a Spanish language, that means you can speak it with anybody, you can listen to anybody and understand, you can read it, and you can also write it. And that would include people that might have different dialects, right? Spain Spanish is different than Mexican Spanish. There's a dialect difference. Same language, different dialect. When you're fluent, you can understand it. Again, remember the D's, right? Lots of changes, different variables, different situations, okay? So we can increase the dog's odor fluency. We can minimize errors, and in this situation, I'm talking about false alerts, and I'm gonna show you some video with examples of that. And we all wanna minimize false alerts, right? That's everyone's like, get out of a trial, you wanna leave with no nose. Even if your day doesn't go great, it's always, I got no nose. So I know that's a big goal for everybody. And anything that we can do to help really clear the scent picture up for the dog, I think is totally worthwhile, okay? We are shoring our dogs up and making their odor response even stronger and their understanding of target odor clearer. It will strengthen odor obedience. And what is odor obedience? If you think of obedience, it's like the dog's gonna listen to the handler, right? You've practiced the 4Ds. The dog will recall, no matter how far away you are, no matter if there's a squirrel, no matter if you're at a park or at home, the dog is obedient, right? They're fluent in obedience. We want the dog to be obedient to odor in a search, right? When you're out doing a search, despite anything else that might be going on, the spectators, the wind, maybe it's raining, the dog should still be highly responsive and obedient to odor. It means they're basically listening to odor and it's calling to them. This is a big one for me. And I got into a big talk with Amy about this, but this working with things like controls in training, I think is really important too, because it teaches the handler to read the questions that the dog might be asking. And this is a term that I hear used a lot. I know I use it a lot. I'll say to my handlers that I'm training, did you see that? Your dog just asked you a question, okay? I'm gonna get into that right now. Okay, so what do I mean when I'm saying the dog is asking a question? The whole thing that prompted this webinar was a video that was sent to me by Anique Loomis. She was at a trial last year in Bonzel where a number of dogs false alerted on gum on a bench in a chapel. Now, is it about the gum itself and the odor of the gum? I don't think so, not necessarily, okay? My advice to her was you need to proof your dog. You need to actually set up situations that may resemble odor. There's gum, we use museum putty. To the dog in that situation, he asks the question like, this is kind of similar to the stuff that is usually with odor. I am not sure, is this the thing? And under pressure, under trial stress, with time and spectators, the handler gets the question and it's enough to prompt them to often blurt alert, because you'll see these calls are really fast. So that would be a great example of proofing. Someone asked about, do the handler need proofing? That would be a proofing exercise, setting up controls or distractions, again, another webinar, but setting up those types of things so your dog has the opportunity to ask the questions, gets the handler comfortable seeing the questions being asked. So you're proofing your handler, making them more comfortable and going, oh, I see, that's a question. That wasn't a statement. The dog alerting and responding to trained odor is more of a statement. They're like, it's here, I expect my treat. Versus, I'm not sure what this is. Can you come look at this for me? So it gets the handler comfortable deciphering those two behaviors. So we're gonna watch these videos. So this is Anique, this is the video that prompted this whole thing. This is a blank search. There's no odor in this search at all. There's the gum. Called it really fast, but he stopped long enough, made her question. This is Betsy Carey, same trial. With Benny, again, blank search. Benny asks a big question here. She says, oh, hey, there's nothing else around. What the heck is under here? Okay. This is interesting. This is Terry Fisk and Mercy a year later at the same trial site. She has a single hide. It's on the piano bench right here. If you can see my cursor, it's right here. This dog asks a big question here. She's like, what is going on? This is very strange. There's the 30-second. Handler's all panicking, right? She hadn't gotten to the odor yet when she asked that question. And that's the hide right there. Okay. All right. So I didn't open a Q&A up for this, but we can. Does anyone have any burning questions about those two searches? Because I have a feeling I probably do.
Hang on a moment, we'll see.
Just see.
I do have, while you're waiting for people to check in, I do have a question about,
sure.
If you train your dog that the Q-tips aren't part of the target scent picture, do you risk the dog alerting on residual odor in a trial? The thinking being that if essential oil transfers to the surface accidentally, would it be odor without the smell of the Q-tip, whereas the intended hide would include a Q-tip?
I would say no. In my training, I actually work on residual odor problems. And I'm going to clear this up because Silka, I don't know if you're here, but I trained with her last weekend and I really liked how she cleared this up, and I'm using it from now on. She uses residual odor when she talks about that problem. Like maybe you have a scent, you know, a tube and you move it and you put it somewhere else. Where that first hide was, there's residual odor there. Okay. So I practice that with my dogs, and that's a bit of a proofing exercise. It's not a control, but it's a proofing exercise. I'm teaching the dog, yes, there's odor there. No, you're not correct, but go to where the odor is strongest, because I really think that residual odor to me is dying odor. It's not kicking off as many VOCs as a live hide is. And you're really splitting hairs with that. You're teaching the dog to basically do chemistry, and they are perfectly capable of doing it. So that's a whole training exercise to work on residual odor. But I don't think training on blank Q-tips is going to create that problem.
All right, we had a few comments.
Sure. Yep.
The behavior looked the same to me. And how long were the first two dogs searching before they asked the question about the gum? And then the last thing was just that it's really interesting that a year later, same location. So those are the
crazy
comments.
Yeah, we thought that was bananas too. Not sure why that is. And I'll tell you, I'm a trial judge, and I've seen this happen a few times with things like that. I had a personal experience with it too. And I don't sit here and go, oh gosh, it must be wintergreen gum. It's not about that. I know with Anik's search, she searched for a good minute. The dog had probably cleared that area before the question came up, which to me, that's what made me say to her, you need to proof him. He needs to work through those variables and be able to omit that question, check it, leave it. And you can see how fast she called that. I mean, we could sit here and pick these searches apart, like, oh, it was a blank room, they searched it too long, all of those things. But my point is, she needed to see that happen more often so she could learn the difference between the two, and that he could become more resilient to work through that problem. Okay. There was another question that I was going to address. What was that one, Dana?
They were talking about how long, which you answered, and then the person didn't see anything different. Were the two things. And then the other thing was, you said it was interesting that a year later you had the same problem. And another person said, so how do you proof against a dog alerting from, prior dog in the trial alerting, falsing?
I'm going to answer that question in a minute, and there's a way to do that. Okay. Because that could be considered yet another variable, right? Other dogs in your search area. Okay. So we'll get into that in a minute. So hold on to that question.
All right.
All right. Awesome. Great. Okay. So how do we set up these training searches with controls? Remember, your dog is doing the best they can with the information that's being provided to them, right? If their whole scent picture of Birch includes putty and Q-tips, right? The big pie, we got to start taking it apart. Like, don't worry about the putty. The putty's not important, okay? Let's get into that. But I want you to proceed with caution. It is so, so, so important that if you are going to practice with controls and give this a try in your scent work, you keep your controls away from, like, they shouldn't even look at each other. They should be in separate rooms. You certainly don't want to handle odor and then handle your controls. I'm super careful about washing my hands and wearing gloves. You do not want to cross-contaminate those things, okay? So keep them really, really separate. You want to make this very clean training as much as possible to avoid some of that residual odor confusion that we mentioned earlier, okay? So this is really important. And I'll show you a few tricks that I use to help myself keep those things clean. Okay, so let me get rid of this because I can't see what I'm doing. Okay, so some control work here. So this is my dog Dash, and I'm doing a container search. My objective in this search is to proof him off of just blank cotton swabs. Adhesives, in this case, I'm using tape and the museum putty and my smell. I say human scent, but it really is my smell, okay? I could do the same exercise and have my training assistant set it up. I could have colleagues set it up. I could have a bunch of people set it up because every time I have a new person incorporated into that search, I'm proofing off a new human, okay? So let's watch this. So this is how I set it up first, okay? So I'm gonna walk you through setting it up. So these are my controls, okay? I'm using silly putty. I just said that. I'm using the Quake Hold, Scotch tape and blue tape. This is predominantly what I use when I'm training containers with my dogs. Now I've set a box up. These are all clean, brand new boxes. Those are blank Q-tips. There's no odor on them. And I've put some tape in there also. I also set up one with the putty. The other thing that I do is I mark my containers. So I have a Sharpie and I put a C. You can put whatever you want, but I put a C for control on the same spot in the box. You can use a pen or a pencil, it's fine. I just happen to use a Sharpie. Where is my control? There it is. And then I will do the same thing with my target, right? Sharpies are pretty stinky, okay? So I don't want to only mark my target or only mark my control. I want to mark all the boxes so that they're all the same. That would be another example of a control. Okay, so that helps me not get them mixed up. Okay, now I've got my controls and my target clear to me. I'm not going to mess it up. Okay, so what I do is I set my controls first. Controls, again, are your blanks. So these are my blank boxes. I have gloves on. Those are the ones I showed you earlier. And then I'm going to walk around and leave some human smell. I'm shedding skin cells all over the place. I set my odor next. This is my odor box. I'm going to set that down. And I'm going to walk around again, not just walk out and set it. Okay. And I also want you to notice, after I place the odor, did I touch anything else? No, I didn't. Because I'm not focusing on that in this training. I'm not working on residual odor with my dog. I'm working on clean controls. These are, you know, little things to think about. So then I'm going to run my dog. There's the question. He's like, hey, and I checked this box. That was the tape. Okay. I don't use putty so much with my dog when I do containers. I mostly use tape. And I thought it was really interesting. He totally ignored the putty, showed some interest on the tape. Is that about the tape or is it about my smell on the tape? I don't know. I can't ask him. Okay, hold on. But he moved off of it with no cue. There's the target. He gets rewarded. Now, because he kind of faltered on that control, I decided to run it again. I just ran it from the other direction. So everything's still in the same place. He's going to go straight to target, and then he's going to hit this control again. Okay, this is a training exercise. This is allowing him the opportunity to learn, to catalog, and to have this experience so that it doesn't happen in a trial. And he gets that. And yeah, he's a toy reward dog, so. And here we go again. Another question on tape. And I asked him to keep working and he moved off of it. And I want you to notice how fast I reward him here. Okay. I did not wait for him to freeze or give his final response because he had to work through that problem of like, gosh, wow, why is there tape and mom smell in this box? It's kind of similar. I'm not sure. And he left it again. As soon as his nose hits target, I pay as quickly as possible. I'm not going to make him wait because he just had to work through a problem. Okay. So that's what that would look like. Let me see. Now I'm going to show you how I clean this mess up. So I basically reverse engineer my searches when I'm working with controls. So I set controls first, then I set odor, then I pick up odor, and then I pick up my controls. And I do wash my hands and I change my gloves in between odor and controls. So we'll show you that. And I don't usually walk this fast. I fast forwarded the video for you guys. So just to drive the point home, I pick up my target and I get it out of there. I put it away, wash, change gloves. Again, I'm not working on residual odor. That's not the problem I want to present to the dog with this. Then I get my controls and those go back into their special place. Okay. So we don't want to be like stacking boxes. And that, you know, it seems tedious, but that's how I keep from getting messy, you know, messing up my boxes. If I really want to keep things clean, I just do the extra work of doing that. I don't want to have controls in one hand and targets in the other and walking back to the shed. I just do them as completely separate exercises. And that's just for me. Okay. I'm a human. I make mistakes. So I try to minimize those as much as possible. Okay. Let's go to the next one. So now I want to show you a vehicle control training session. And this is John Zupanzik and Hannah. So we're proofing off non-target visuals and scent signals, and we're using controls. And in this case, our controls are our blank tins. So the first search you're going to see is actually blank. There is no odor out at all. You have tins out, and he used putty. He used the museum putty to stick these on the vehicle. So again, the first search, there's no odor out. So let's watch this. You're going to see a lot of questions here with Hannah. This is the first time she's ever done this. So here's where all the tins are. Just so you can see, he has 10 out, just so you get an idea of where he placed them. And there's 2 vehicles in this search. And now she's going to run it. See if you can notice where the dog might ask a question. So she's working the vehicle really nicely. She understands vehicle searches. And then she's like, what the heck is this tin doing here? What, why is that here? Usually there's odor, but there's nothing. Huh, weird. I'm narrating for you what's I think is going on in her head. So she's like, well, that's odd. Let's go check over here. She's like, why are these here? So interesting. She's going to check the other vehicle. She's going to ask another question here in a minute. There's an so Amy's talking on Friday about expectations. So aren't we playing with the dog's expectations a little bit here? Absolutely. She's going to ask another question. She's like, what the heck is going on here? Less of a question though. She was more willing to move off of it. And she's like, okay, well, maybe let's go check over here because I'm done with this car. And he calls finish, and he actually rewarded her, which I loved. Okay. Now we're going to do the same drill. The tins are in the same place, but this time he's going to add a single odor. The odor is on there's a silver like wagon, station wagon type car. It's on the driver's side front, just so you know. It's very clear when she hits it. Okay, so we're going to show Hannah. So again, there's one hideout. Remind you where all the controls are. They're in the same place. He just removed one of the controls and swapped it out for an odor tin. Okay, so started from the back of the car, which is fine. She's like, all right, last time this was kind of weird. Let's try it again. Working some odor off the garage. There's your odor. So she gets rewarded. Good girl. So he's going to finish searching the other vehicle with her. She's an elite dog, so he's just practicing. Tiny question on that one again. She moved off a little easier. Nice. Okay. All right. More Q&As. Questions, anyone? So far?
I do have a couple.
Okay. I'll
One
do my
is
best.
back to your container drill. Didn't you have tape on the cotton swabs? Or I guess when there's odor.
I did. I did.
And I'm not sure, other than that, why they're asking, maybe because you're proofing for tape?
Correct. For that drill, I was proofing on adhesives. That was my goal. And the blank Q-tips.
But that does not mean you wouldn't use tape with your cotton swabs.
That does not mean that, correct.
All right. Next question is, how are the control boxes stored when you're done? And in a separate shed from the odor, or?
Yeah, I tend to bag everything, and then I keep them in a separate shed. Mm-hmm.
People want to know if John's tins were new, and what makes the difference between a question look and an alert look, or what makes that difference?
Okay. I think John is here. I believe those tins were new, so they were clean. So he had not used them before with any of his dogs. To quote him, he said, "I'm doing this forever from now on," after he did that. So yeah, those were new. What was the second part of that question?
Let's see. What makes the difference between the question and the alert look? What is the difference?
For some dogs, it can be hard to see. The goal of proofing is that you don't get the question at all anymore. Okay. The reason the dog is asking the question at all is because they haven't had the proofing. Remember, that scent profile or the image in their brain of what birch odor looks like could contain a lot of things. And a lot of it you don't know. You can't ask the dog. It might be the metal tins. It might be the glue dots, right? By giving the dog the opportunity, like Hannah just showed that really nicely, of like, I expect to have odor in this thing. There's a tin right here, and usually these things have odor with them. What the heck's going on? That's the question. She's like, why is this not paying anymore? By proofing, you shouldn't even see those questions anymore. If you're seeing those questions, your dog needs proofing. They really should go away. Does that help answer the question? It's not that you're never, and if you get them in training or trial, again, this is why when Anik sent me that video, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a great thing to talk about. Because if the dog sees that enough times, just like I was at a training session with somebody and she had put adhesive all over all the chairs. And I was like, that's so great that you do that. And the dogs just omit that as even a possible reward opportunity, right? They're like, yeah, there's that glue stuff, but that's not what pays. It's that birch odor that pays. So the questions go away.
Right. Should we proof gloves?
Yes, and in fact, I do show that in our next, I'm going to set an exterior search and I do proof with gloves, yes. And you can put gloves in your container. With my working dog, I do that a lot. If I set my controls, I'll take the gloves and I'll put them into containers as well. And I don't know if you guys know, but I do wildlife work. So if I have biologists collecting biological samples for me, whether it's scat, which would be poop, or scent swabs off of an animal, I always request that the biologist who's doing the collections send me their smell. So I tell them, like, out of the field, not when you're handling that animal, make sure you're clean, put some gloves on for me and just kind of like take some fabric or whatever we're using, whether it's, fabric swatches or filter paper, whatever we happen to be catching that odor with, just touch it a lot with your bare hands, do it with the gloves on, and then send me your gloves, send me all that stuff, because I will use them to proof the dogs off of their smell. Because again, if I show the dog a kit box scat that's been collected by, Michael, there's no guarantee to me that he's not hitting on Michael. So I want to take Michael out of the dog's scent picture by presenting that odor all by itself and letting the dog know the smell of Michael doesn't pay. The kit fox smell pays. Okay. And the dogs can learn really quickly, like, oh, that's Michael, and Michael's with the kit fox, but it's not about Michael. Okay. Is that starting to make sense? Hard for us to understand because humans don't work in an odor place. It's really hard for people to wrap their brains around what's happening. Your dogs are doing incredible chemistry experiments in their nose. It is wild. If you want to do any reading and read about like some of the work that Lauren DeGrief does, I had a paper. I can put that later, Dana. I've got a paper from her that's interesting to read about controls and how the dogs can make those differentiations is really amazing.
Great. Maybe you can put it in the Facebook page.
Oh, that's a great idea. I'll do that. I'll do that.
We have a number of questions about at what level do you proof? Does the dog just be fluent in odor, and like when in their career would you proof?
I do it pretty early. I mean, think about this. When you start your dog on boxes, you don't start with one box with food in it. Well, you might at first. Sometimes I'll do that, like, hey, dog, I'm going to put food in here and you can get it out yourself, to make a correlation that the box is going to pay and that it's safe for them to get the food. Sure, we start like that. And that's just getting the dog comfortable and conditioning that the box is something that's going to be rewardable. But you don't just do one box, do you? You've usually got maybe 3 or 4, or maybe 5, and then you build up from there. Are those other boxes not controls? They're blank, they don't pay. You're already doing it right off the bat. You are already proofing the dog. Go to where there's odor. Omit whatever other, if you got a package from Amazon, who knows what smells are in there? You've certainly touched it. Maybe your trainer's touched it. Maybe you work 2 dogs. Your other dog has touched it. Don't worry about Fido touching that box. Go to the box that has the odor in it. So you're kind of already doing it right off the bat. The more intense kind of proofing, like what I showed with Dash, with the Q-tips, I would probably do that with a dog that's a little bit more advanced. Just so, again, it's not even that he's got stronger like odor recognition. It's more about one of the D's, duration, right? Distraction. Does this dog have enough training experience where if I throw a challenge at him like that, he can work through a little bit of frustration, that he's resilient enough with all of his training before that, that I've built up enough duration, mental duration for him to work a behavior that he's not going to have a brain explosion, but like, I don't understand. So I want to make sure my dog had enough reinforcement history or enough experience getting rewarded for finding odor that they can kind of work through a little bit of confusion, because that's what training is. You have to present problems to the dog they haven't seen before and allow them to work through that. Okay. If I had a dog who's a little more nervous and we're just trying to get them comfortable searching at all, I might not throw variables at this stage. I want to get the dog more confident. And that would go back to your D's. You need more distraction. You need more duration. You need more, diversity in that dog's career. So I think having a resilient dog is when you can start throwing these things at them.
Great. Let's continue on. And then I have more questions, but we can do them at the end once you're done.
Okay. So proofing is a verb. Controls are a noun. Proofing is an activity. The controls are the thing. So here's a proofing exercise. Placing clean, empty scent vessels in plain sight, like we did with the vehicle with Hannah. That is a proofing exercise. The controls are the clean scent vessels. Sometimes they can have cotton swabs in them, sometimes not. In this case with Hannah, he was using the putty. So we were doing 2 things. We had the putty and we had the tin itself. We were working on the visual cue of what a tin means to a dog and also the olfactory one, because those things carry their own signature smell. So another example, this is again, proofing. It's an activity. Placing clean tape and adhesives under chairs and tables and letting the dog work that problem. That is a proofing exercise. What are the controls? The tape, the glue dots, the adhesives. Okay, so proofing is an activity. It is the training. It is the learning opportunity for the dog. The controls are the thing that you're using to teach that thing. Okay, verb versus noun. So this is an example of an exercise designed by Amy Hero. This would be another way to proof, and this brings odor back into the picture. So another proofing activity would be to place target odor in unexpected locations. So Amy's going to talk on Friday about using a dog's expectations to teach new concepts. And this is something that she did with this exercise. We were very lucky to get to run this one. So what we have here is a suspended hide, which is Dash's nose is on in this photo. And all of these ORT boxes around here are blank. There's no odor in them at all. So the dogs came in with a pretty strong expectation of what is supposed to be happening because this is such a huge visual signal. And usually these boxes have odor in them, right? They have enough learning history that there's an expectation there. But by having these out blank, they serve as controls, okay? The odor's here. So it is a proofing exercise. The controls present are the boxes, okay? I don't think she had any blank Q-tips in there or anything like that. You could up the game and do that, kind of like I did with the container. You could make it more challenging and add those controls in. But for right now, the visual aspect and the olfactory aspect of those ORT boxes were the controls. Want the dog to be odor obedient, drive to odor, source odor, despite those controls being present, because it's not about the boxes, it's about the odor. Okay. So she's going to show this on Friday. If you're going to her talk, it's going to be a good one. That was a great exercise. So she allowed me to use that, which is really cool. Okay, let's see. So here's an exercise. Someone asked about something related. Oh, the gloves. Okay. So this is an exercise, and I do this with this is an exterior search, but I do the same thing with, you saw me do it with containers where I walked around. I'll do this with interiors, vehicles, all that kind of stuff. So the first search you're going to watch is actually a blank search. I don't put any odor out, and it's going to include some human tracks and some controls. So I want to make a disclaimer here. If your dog is doing any handler discrimination or tracking, doing a blank search in an exterior like I'm using, which is a park with grass, can put your dog into some conflict, because if they're used to doing article retrieval, this can be a little bit confusing. So be careful of your context. If you normally do your tracking or your article discrimination in grass or in outside areas like this, just be mindful it may not be the best exercise for you, but you can certainly do this in interiors with vehicles and with containers. Okay, so this is how I set up an exterior control. There are my controls. Anyone asked how I store them? I love ball jars. I use these for my working dogs too. I can find the study. I think it was FAU did a study about storage, and these were actually the best for storing odor and for storing controls, just good old ball jars. So that's what I keep them in. I have clean gloves. Now, I want you to notice my controls don't have holes in them in this particular situation. Again, I'm human, I make mistakes, I train a lot of dogs, things can get confusing. So a lot of times my controls look like that because it keeps me from getting them confused with anything else. I'm like, these are controls because there's no holes. Could you put odor in those? Of course, and I do. But for the most part, I like to use those just because it helps my brain keep things straight. Okay, hold on. This thing is, here we go. Okay, so I put this in fast forward. So I'm going to walk around the area and I'm going to place these controls. There's a control there. I have gloves on. There's a control right there. I'm going to put one. I think I put 3 out. Okay, now I'm going to walk around. Laying track. Okay, just fouling up the search area, putting my odor. I'm going to touch stuff with my control glove hands. Walk around a little bit more. If you have a dog that likes to track people, this is a really good way to work on it. And I have one right now who loves to track, so we're doing a lot of this. Now, the other thing that I do is the way I enter the search area is not the way I exit. Okay, I go out a different way than I came in. Okay, now I'm gonna run. This is Monica and Ben, and they're gonna run this search. Look where he goes straight to the control. He's like, what the heck is that doing there? Huh, weird. But he leaves it really nicely. But noticed it, right? In a trial situation, you might be like, what was that? Why would my dog sniff the grill? Right? And we start to, get a little bit in our heads about it. But that's exactly what they should do, is check it out and be like, nope, that's not the thing. He's tracking me a little bit, isn't he? Just a little bit right there. You saw his head go down. I walked right in there. He's doing a little bit of tracking. Notices the other control, which is on there. Little critter interest right there. Nose is back down on the ground. He does have a grass eating thing. He does it all the time. I don't know if Monica's here, but she'll vouch to that. The grass eating is not a stress behavior with him. So we saw a little bit of tracking. He definitely noticed the controls, did a nice job, and she got him out of there pretty quickly. So now we're going to do the same type of search, and I'm going to set controls again, but this time I'm going to put one target odor out, okay? Now this is the same search area. I just changed the camera angle a little bit. So there's already a lot of track out there, which is great. I've already walked all over and touched a bunch of stuff. So I'm just going to add more to that picture for him. So this is me setting up this search. Again, set controls first with your clean hands. Gloves, preferably, if you can. There's my controls. I'm going to use 4 this time. There they are. No adhesive for this. I'm just doing the tins. I didn't put any Q-tips in them. I didn't put any magnets or anything. They're just the tins by themselves. So I'm going to place these for her. And she's watching. None of this is blind. She knows what's going on. If I was doing this for the first time with somebody, I would probably not do it blind. I'd be sure that they're very clear, like, okay, this is a control over here and this is a control over there. So that when they're seeing that question, they're like, ah, okay, yep, that's a control. Got it. So again, I'm going to touch stuff. My camera falls down. I left it in because it makes me laugh, and training's never perfect. So, and I'd already done so much work to set this up that I just got back to it. So there's the gloves. One glove there, one glove over here. So someone had asked about gloves. Yes, I will put them in the search area. Again, those are my clean control gloves. They just have my smell on them. So yes, that is another control that I can proof off of because I know someone asked earlier. So I did put those out in the search area. Okay, and again, I'm gonna walk around, touch some stuff, and I'm gonna exit a different way than I came in. Now I'm gonna set my odor. And now you notice I'm using a red tin with some holes in it. Again, I'm a human, I make a lot of mistakes, not really, but I do. So the red tin, it's also for the handler. It's real obvious to them. This is the target, the rest don't count. We just care about this one. Okay, if your dog notices those, that's fine. Let him move himself off. Right here, this is it. Now, I'm gonna put it on a black surface. And in case you didn't know that, dogs do not see red very well. And when you put it on a dark surface, there's very little contrast. So it kind of just disappears into the environment. So super easy for the handler to see, almost impossible for the dog to see. So it can take some of that visual component out. So you notice my controls are silver and my target odor is going to sort of disappear into the environment, but not for the handler. So again, fresh gloves, go out. I'm going to place it and I'm still going to walk around a little bit more, but I'm not going to touch anything, right? I've got odors all over my hand. I'm not going to touch anything, but I am going to walk around. I don't want to just walk out, place an odor and walk back. Trust me, your dogs pick up on that stuff so quick. If you're doing that in your training, be very mindful because I promise you your dog is keyed in on that. Okay. So now we're going to run Ben. And you also notice I didn't put the stinky odor gloves out, okay? Not working on that for this particular problem, okay? Okay, so here's Monica and Ben, because he hasn't done this before. So I wanna make this very, very, very clear for him. Notices the glove, leaves it really nicely. Notices the other control, which was right there. That was a little head turn on a control. Tracking again, just a bit. He's gonna pick up odor here in a second. Head's gonna come up there. And drives to odor, beautiful. Good. So I asked her to go ahead and clear the search area. Again, he's an elite dog, so get some training in, let him, you know, if I'm gonna go through all the trouble of set up a complicated search like this, I want the dog to investigate it. I want them to clear the whole search area. I don't, you know, we know there's one hide, but the dog doesn't know that necessarily. So I like to just, you know, you don't know if you have a problem until you let the dog experience it. Let them decide when they're finished. But she hadn't checked this right side of the search area yet. So I asked her, just take him through there, just like you would at a trial. Just make sure you got everything. Let him see all those controls. Let him, you know, smell all my smells. Little grass eating there, which is, again, very typical for him. She's going to do one more pass through here. And she makes a really nice call here because he clears this really nicely. And then he's going to drive back to that one hide. There's a control right there, he noticed. Doing a really nice job. Runs to odor. She praises him off and calls finish. So that was kind of, to me, Ben saying like, yep, I've checked everything. This is the only game in town. So I'm going to go back to that one. She's like, all right, we are done. Okay. Now I'm going to clean this up. And I kind of went over this a little bit with the containers, but I want to drive a point home about how to set up these searches. So this is how I would clean up that particular search. Again, I'm going to do it. I'm going to, whoops. Oh, sorry. Ah, I hit the wrong button. No, what are you doing? There we go. Again, I'm going to reverse chain my setup. So what did I put down last? My odor. So what am I going to pick up first when I'm done? My odor. Okay, we're going to do it backwards. Back chaining. So I go out with my stinky odor hands, grab the target, get it out of there. Okay, put it away. Wash my hands, put on clean gloves. Then I get my controls. Just trying to drive this home for you. And I have my jar with me so I can drop them right in there, pick them all up, yada, yada, yada. Checking to make sure I got everything. And then I put the lid on that and we're good, okay? So the takeaways for this particular webinar, and then we have a good amount of time for questions, which is great. So remember, proofing is an action. It's the actual training itself. It is the problem solving that the dog has the opportunity to do. That is the proofing, or maybe the handler has an opportunity to do, right? Proofing you is getting you comfortable with your dog asking you questions in training. And the goal is that those questions, again, they go away because the dog has had their question answered. Remember, they're doing the best with the information that they're getting. So if they're not clear what target odor is, and there's other things competing with their attention, for example, someone asked about dog smell, okay? We know that in trials that can happen. It's like the notorious, a dog falls on one box and then a couple dogs start showing interest in it. And there's, we have a ton of theories about why that's happening. Sometimes we think it's someone wanted to do a scientific experiment. Is there some kind of like excitement gene in that dog's saliva that all the dogs are immediately drawn to? Or do the dogs equate the smell of other dog odor with target odor because they co-occur so often? If you're training in groups with the same dogs all the time, believe me, those dogs are taking every bit of available information to problem solve. So if they're in the same group of dogs, you always train with the same person, Fido's smell might have become part of the scent picture for Cher, right? And she puts those two things together in her mind. So when you go to a trial, the dog's like, well, there's the dog smell that usually comes with odor. We get a question in trial, we're under pressure, we call alert, boom. Okay, we have an error, a false alert. Is the dog false alerting? No, the dog's just not clear about what the target odor is. So you can certainly do proofing with other dog smell. I wouldn't consider that a control. That is definitely more of a distraction, because unless you're training with the same exact dog every time, you can manage that dog's diet. You can manage how much they're slobbering, what's going on with their health. There's a lot of variables there in that control. So I would call that more of a distraction, but definitely worth proofing. One of the things I was going to say when I proof, when I'm setting up training for like my working dogs, if I'm doing a big field trial, I will let one of my other dogs just run around with me while I'm setting my controls. I will have another one of my dogs just hanging out and running around with me, because then I know they're leaving track also. I'm leaving my smell, but the other dog's leaving a bunch of track as well, so that my dog can go, oh yeah, Bolt was out here, but she's no use to me. So I'm going to focus on my job and find target odor. Okay. So remember, controls are a thing. It's the constant variable in your training. It's the metal tins, it's the Q-tip, it's the tape, it's the glue putty, it's the container itself. It could be a vehicle, right? It's whatever you are presenting that odor with, that is your control. So again, proofing will result in odor fluency, can minimize your false alert errors, it can strengthen odor obedience, and it teaches the handler to read the questions in training so that you don't get them later on in your trialing or in your later training as you level up in your challenges. You get less questions. The dog has a much, much clearer understanding of the task. And now we have time for questions. And thank you everybody for joining. It's really great to have you guys here. This is a topic I know that hasn't really been covered, so I wanted to kind of touch on it. I'm a working dog person, so this is a huge part of my life, is working with controls. And I think there's a lot of value to it in sport detection. Even if you're just doing it for fun, I think it's really cool to present these like brain challenges for the dogs, because that's why we do this. That's why we play scent games. We want to give our dog mental challenges. I call it math a lot, right? You're letting them work math problems and puzzle solving. And I think anything you can do to sort of like throw a new variable in, like, hey, let's make sure you're not hitting on me or your trainer or the Q-tips or whatever it might be. I think anything you can do to enrich the experience for your dogs is just a great thing to do. And I know we all think about, oh, food distractors and toys, but this is a much more subtle thing to work on. And I think it's very powerful, and it's just as significant as working through like potato chips. So I can take some questions. I think we have about 10 minutes or so.
Sure. First question is, when the dog asks a question on a control item, what do you do as a handler while you're training?
That's a great question. I generally don't do anything. It really, I'm going to say it. It depends. It depends a lot on the dog. I kind of shy away from using something like leave it, because I think that gets a little too obediency. I want to set it up so that the dog, and you saw me with Dash there, he was like, really like, I just don't understand. This smells so similar. I just waited him out. If you're working your dog on the leash, you can just wait them out. The minute they make any intention to move away, like they start to lift up and move off that control, I move with them. So I'm giving them support as a handler, and I'm physically giving them support. Like, yeah, oh, that was awesome. And then when they do get to target odor, if I have a hideout, I pay really quick and pretty heavily. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you wash the car before proofing?
Good question. I guess you could if you really wanted to be super anal. Yeah, you could. I don't know that I'd worry so much. So if you look at something like a vehicle, you sort of have a complex control problem, right? Because you've got environmental smells that are going to come with that car too. So that's a tricky one, because you kind of have, to me, looking at something like a vehicle or even a container, even though containers have smell, to me, that's a visual proofing exercise, right? Sort of, that's why I really loved how that tin exercise worked for Hannah, because it really like pushed her little thinking brain a little bit. So there's an expectation about a car. There's a visual component of the car. So it's not just olfactory, it's also visual too. So when I look at a car as a control, I see it more as a visual control than an olfactory one, because I think that's a really hard thing to manage with something like that. You have less control over it. You know what I mean? Ha! That was a pun.
For the car drill, is it necessary to have the tins visible? Do you ever have them invisible?
Yes, I do both. Because remember, the tins have a smell. Have you ever smelled metal? It's stinky. And if you're using adhesive, it's also stinky. And I think there's something to be said for having a tin hidden in a way that it is resembling the way a hide would be placed. Because the dog is going to notice and be like, well, that's odd. It's even in the right place where a hide should be. Right? So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is it better to start the session with or without odor?
I don't know that there's a better. I just think it's different. I play around with both. If I have a really strong dog, I can start with odor and end on a blank. If you're just kind of introducing this concept to your dog, I'd probably end with odor, just to, you know, especially if they're asking a lot of questions in training, they're just like, I don't understand, like, why is this out here and there's no target odor and what's going on? I might end with odor just to give them a win, right? Because we want to end on a win. We want to end with the dog feeling confident. So if I'm working with a newer dog that really hasn't done this, I will a lot of times will finish with odor. But if I have a dog that we work through controls a couple of times, then I might just do a blank and leave it good. And I am a proponent of, if my dog does a blank search and clears really well and doesn't ask any questions and does their job and, you know, checks controls and passes them eagerly, I reward that. I will finish my search and I will reward that, so that the dog is winning. Because, you know, the searching is the game. The game really isn't about finding the hide. The game is about searching, right? And I tell people this all the time. I said, you know, 98% of your dog's job, even in a 2-minute search in a room, is omitting where odor doesn't live, right? It's like they have to go through the space and find like, well, not over here, not over here, not over here. Aha, there it is. So a lot of their job, and as you level up into higher levels, or maybe if you're not trialing, you're just playing for fun, you start to give your dog bigger search problems. Most of the search is them clearing the search area. So you better enjoy that part of it and enjoy the searching, not so much the finding, right? I think we emphasize finding hides a lot. I think we need to emphasize more the game of searching, right?
Will you use the tins again? The person's thinking about the tin that maybe went on the grill, now has grill scent on it. And with that, do you ever wash your vessels?
You can wash your vessels. Yeah, it's obviously much easier to clean controls. Those scent vessels are really hard because of the oils we use are really, really sticky and super volatile. They're very hard to get out. There is some spray on the market that you can use, but controls usually pretty easy. I soap and water, and I'll tell you the best thing to do is leave things out in the sun. If you leave things out in the sun for an extended period of time, it has a nice way of degrading odor to get it back to a more neutral state. So yeah, I will clean them if I feel like they've gotten, pretty gnarly. And you want to be aware too, if you've had a dog that's maybe been in contact with target odor and then maybe been in contact with a control, that you might need to clean that one pretty thoroughly before you use it again. If you're worried about residual odor. If you're not, then you can kind of put that separately. I might have a separate jar that's like, might be a little residual odory, and I might work that with my more advanced dog. But yeah, be mindful of that too.
You also proof magnets?
Yes. Yep.
All right. And
we know dogs know magnets, right? Don't they poop like to the magnetic pole? Didn't someone do a study? Yeah.
Do you ever put more than one target pin out when proofing?
Yes. Yes. Okay. For the samples, we just did one.
Do you have ideas on how to proof dog spit?
Well, you could take the Q-tip and do a little, like you were going to do an embark test, get some slobber on that and put that out. Make sure the other dog hasn't been around target odor. Obviously, you don't want to do it in the middle of class when you're like, oh, here, your dog just ran the hide. Let me, just in case. But yeah, you could just swab the dog's mouth or even just their nose. You could take the swab and just kind of rub their nose and get some of the moisture from that. And you could absolutely do that. You'll get a lot of questions on that one, but it's worth doing. And people touching things too. I think it's really important.
What do you use to wash your hands?
I just use like detergent. I don't usually use like a soap. I usually use like a dish soap, and I just use an unscented dish soap because it breaks the grease down a little bit better. So my hands end up like dry and bleeding, but I tend to use like fragrance-free dish soap. That's what I use. If anyone else has any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them, but that's what I've been using. You can also do alcohol, but that can really be rather painful, but you can do that.
How often do you train for this? Just in class, or do you do additional training as well?
I haven't really seen it much in class. I think it would be hard to manage in a big class, but you can do it. Certainly, just have to be mindful about cross-contamination and things like that. I would say like with my own dogs, with my working dogs, they work on controls pretty much every time they work. I mean, every time we train. Once the dogs have a pretty good, usually in the first like week or two, if they've got a pretty good understanding of target odor, I'm getting a strong response, starting to get some communication, expectation, then I'll start throwing controls in pretty early on, not right away, but pretty early on. But I am already using things like empty jars, right, as controls. And I don't do it a lot. I might do this, 30% of my training. I'll throw some intentional controls out where I'm like, I am going to have someone else set and put their gloves in the box, or I'm going to have, my friend Melissa walk around and lay a bunch of false track for my dog and just run them through there and do a blank that way. I might do like 30% of the time because you're kind of doing it a lot anyway. But when I'm doing those intentional, like, ooh, I don't like how much my dog really hit on that tape. I think I need to work on that. So trust me, I'm going to be putting tape in the boxes for a little while until he has that question answered for himself. Yeah.
Often one false alert at a trial leads to more false alerts in the same place until the spell is broken. Some attribute this to a special sauce or an anticipatory pheromones or saliva moisture. How does one prove for that type of trial dog falsing, especially
Yeah,
since nobody is certain why?
yeah. I mean, I would say we kind of talked about using dog saliva and things like that. I don't think that would hurt to proof your dog off of the presence of dog smell on containers. It's very hard to say why that's happening, and I know exactly what you're talking about. There is a dog that comes in and like breaks a spell, and then everybody it just stops. It's very strange. I think that my opinion is, and of course I haven't done a scientific study. I don't think anybody has. It would be a good one. Any scientists out there, chemists, I do think there is an element of intense dog interest that the dogs, whether or not they offer full-blown alert or just enough investigation that prompts the handler to call it, can vary. I've seen both. I don't think it would ever hurt to do some proofing. And one of the things I will say, and trial hosts might kill me, but if you volunteer at any trials, whether it's AKC or NACSW, and you have the opportunity to take some of the blank boxes home with you to practice, that's a really good thing to do. I know a lot of times the COs, especially if they're like cardboard boxes, they really can't use them again for trial. And I say this with caution, so please don't go out there and like assault the COs for containers. But if you are volunteering and you hear them say, hey, does anybody want some of these blank containers, take the opportunity and work with those. I know a lot of my trainers, my instructors will do that when the opportunity is presented. Or if you're in a group class a lot, and maybe you're training with a friend, say, are you done with these boxes? Are you ready to trash them? Like, I'll take them home and work on them. So maybe work where I call it a little dirty, have things a little bit not as pristine so your dog can work through those distractions. Yeah.
Great. I have just two more.
Yep.
If you place the control odor containers in the same jar after use, wouldn't the environmental odors also be in the jar with the controls?
Yes.
Okay. And you're not worried about that?
Not so much. Not so much. So let me give you an example. So here's the thing. There's so many variables. You could break down these trainings into like 100 different variations. So for the one that I showed with the exterior with Ben and Monica, I was really focused on two things: the visual component of the controls. So I had them out where the dog could actually see them, and my tracking. I wasn't so worried about the scent of the tins in that particular search. I was more worried about the visual aspect of it. If I were to run that again, like if I was going to use those for an interior search, I might wash them. But those environmental odors don't seem to persist as long as things like oil. Now, if you put your hides on a car and it gets all greasy, then yeah, those are pretty contaminated. You might want to see about cleaning those. But if I'm going to do another park environment like that, I probably wouldn't worry because there's probably a lot of the same environmental odors happening regardless. But if I were going to use those for something like an interior search, I might wash them, unless I want to throw that in there. Maybe I do want to do that in a container search and be like, here's a bunch of grass smell. I'm going to throw that in the container boxes and add a distraction to the mix as well. You just have to be mindful about what you're testing or what you're training. I think that's really my point, is like when you're setting up your search for practice, like what am I actually teaching this dog? Like what am I presenting to them? What variables are here that I might not even be thinking about? Like, okay, yeah, I put tins in the boxes, so that's weird. I'll put some tins in there, see if that metal is interesting to the dog. Or, hey, I used these yesterday when I trained with Ben, and he put his nose on them, and we had them at the park. So I know I'm throwing dog odor in, and I'm throwing in the smell of the dirt and the grass and whatever else, and obviously my smell. So, okay, I just have to be aware. So then if I get a hard question, right, in training, it's like, whoa, wow, my dog really hit on that. Then I have to go, okay, well, that tin had Ben's smell on it, my smell on it, the grass on it. Which of those things is my dog finding so interesting? Then I might go you could go down a rabbit hole with this stuff. It might be like, well, then maybe I need to proof off grass. Maybe I need to get some more stuff from Ben. Is it just about the tin, or is it that other stuff that was with the tin? And you can actually break this down into smaller bits and pieces. Is that making sense?
It is to me.
Okay.
I'm not
And this is
getting any
what's-
more questions beyond that.
This is what
I caught you all off. Just a minute. Why is this still going on? There we are. Monica, you're on mute.
You just stopped it.
Yeah. Yeah. I intentionally just stopped it. It was like there was one question left.
Yeah.
And yeah. And I figure she was going to end up repeating pretty much the same stuff that she had been repeating.
Right.
So takeaways from that. What's one takeaway?
Proofing. Here, I'll give you 3.
Okay. Okay, we do, I do a lot of proofing controls in class. We do felt markers all the time in class because I do felt markers on boxes. Judy Soltez taught me that tape needs to be proofed off because Katie decided that she was going to alert and not be able to be pulled away from her office supply box. And we occasionally use other dogs' saliva. We also make a point of changing around Q-tips. So if students have been using their own Q-tips for 6 months, they bring their Q-tips and they exchange that bottle with somebody else. Came up kind of significantly last night in the CWAGS trial, where a couple of really strong dogs who haven't been in class for a while, but have been practicing together, couldn't identify Yolanda's Q-tips. And like, there was something wrong with the smell. So obviously those particular dogs were focusing on the person who's setting the hides smell and the odor, not just the odor. So yeah, go ahead.
Could that also have been something that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, about the continuum of intensity of odor? Could those Q-tips have had much less or much more odor on them?
Absolutely. And that's part of why it's really important to swap around stuff all the time, whether it's the intensity or swap with other people or whatever. I just have to ask Monica, are you guys doing music or something? I see what looks like a microphone on a stand behind you.
This is a reminder. Give Cooper his CBD and Tegra.
It's a light.
Ah, okay. I was
A light.
intrigued. I was totally
I know,
intrigued.
it's very
I didn't say
bizarre
anything.
light.
And it was like, that looks like a microphone. I can just see somebody there
does.
playing a piano or something. Yeah, okay.
It does. It's just a light.
Okay. Okay, so I've actually set your homework for next week, for this week, which is obviously proofing and watching the leash handling video if you haven't seen it. So it should be on the Facebook group. I just posted it a couple of seconds ago.
Okay.
And for next week, you guys are going to be together. We want some tall things, some short things, maybe some tables and chairs, and we're going to be on leash. So it's all going to be around, we're going to make really easy hides, but can you negotiate the space with a leash in your hand? So when I do this in class, I have a fairly tall thing that we call an obelisk, which is just a carpeted box that's about this high. We use a stroller. We use the wheelchair because they have handles that are hard to get around. We use kids' toys. There's all kinds of different things that you have to figure out how to leash handle around. And you're going to use a 10-foot leash, 10 to 15-foot leash, a longer kind of leash.
Okay. And can it be outside?
It can absolutely be outside. Yeah, absolutely. And the week after that, which is actually an extra week, I want to do Amy Hero's video or webinar on changing expectations, because it's just, Amy is amazing anyway, but it's a really good webinar. And I think you're both still around for that.
So that's a good segue to next week is technically week 6, which is the end of this set.
So do we want to go on? Do we want to break? What are people thinking?
I want to do the Amy Hero webinar if we can as a week 7.
Mhm.
And then I am fine with whatever you want.
Do you want to chat about that, Margaret, or do you have an opinion you want to share at this point?
Definitely would like more. Thinking of timing and some travel and other things coming up. I just need to look at a calendar, I think, basically. So we have next week, correct?
Yes, I'm going to go to a calendar. We have next week, which is the 3rd, and we're going to do leash handling. And we have the week after, if you'd like, which is the 10th, which would be the Amy Hero video.
Okay.
And then you get into the week before spring fling, the week before the Kootenai Underdogs trial, the week before the CKC agility trial, et cetera, et cetera. Don't know what you all are doing.
Yeah.
I don't know what your other travel plans may be.
Yeah. Well, it's mostly the spring fling. I've got the Kodak trial before that, which is fine. What are you thinking, Monica?
Hold on a sec. I'm just in my calendar.
Yeah.
So trying to see if I can get that. I think I too would like more. So, oh, did I lose you guys? No. Okay. So I was thinking I always think midweek times are the most likely to work. And so I kind of thought, what if we set up another X number, another 6, let's say, classes, picking a time that works for us. And we just then are flexible. Like, Margaret, if we decide we're going camping, we say to Jean, that one we got to cancel. And we tack on to the end if that works for Jean. Like, I wouldn't want to do that the day before to you, but certainly a week before we should know what's happening. And so if we can that's one way of doing this.
And absolutely, and that works for me. And do you want the 2 weeks off that are potentially traveling weeks for you guys, which would be before and after the spring fling? So the 17th and 24th. Do you want to start in June potentially?
Well,
it's keeping Wednesday at 12.
Now I'm looking at my calendar again.
Or 11 or something like that.
Okay. So there's today. Next week is the 3rd, right?
The 17th, those days are going to be fairly busy for me, winding up my Kodak trial, getting the motorhome ready, and provisioning. So the 17th may not be great for me.
Okay. And then the week after, on the 24th, we will hopefully be camping.
Okay.
So yes, so probably the 31st would be the start date. I think that's the Wednesday after.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that absolutely works for me if it works for you guys. And I'm really happy to have it. I'm just going to add that, even though it may be changing, because otherwise I will forget. What is it called? Nosework specialty. Sorry. And let's say continue to say 12 o'clock, although I might bump it back to 11.
Okay.
And I'll say repeating on Wednesday for 6 weeks, not 13. Come on. Don't know what I did for 13. And then if we need to change it and, you want to give me 24 hours notice or whatever, because you're going to be away, that is absolutely fine with me. And we can bump them to the end.
Okay.
Okay. So starting May 31st at 11 a.m.
Let's say 12, and I may bump it to 11, if that works for you guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know when that continues through, but it would continue through the beginning of July. Yep. May 31st to July 5th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that certainly works for me. And then my other question is, do you want to do the 1 week working in 1 week webinar? Is that useful? I know the webinars are of differing value, but I always try to hit something different. And that's up to you.
I enjoy watching the webinars for the theory piece of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't feel like a waste of time.
Not
I
to me.
haven't felt that. No.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so that works for me because I have to watch them anyway because I need to
Yeah.
set my CEUs and it makes me sit down and actually watch them. And my apologies for today. I hit the computer at some point and grabbed some crackers to eat, and my share screen went to a different screen. And
That's
I came
okay.
back and was like, what do I do? But you still had the sound. I assume you
not
still
good.
had
That
the
was good.
sound. Because my sound went through my my speaker, my other speaker, and it's like it should be coming through my headphones. I'm assuming you can hear. Okay, anything else?
I for the homework that you've posted,
Yep.
I will really do my best. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are gone for me. And I have agility class on Monday. So that's life interfering.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I will apologize in advance.
And absolutely. I mean, that's the problem with doing the webinar week is that we end up doing what I would have done in class as homework. So
Yeah.
it's okay. We can do it another time. It will come up again. Yeah.
Okay.
I understand not doing homework.
Thank goodness.
Although I'm doing the left and right course with Wendy Alexander right now, and I'm the only one that sent in homework, and I've done 3 days of homework.
Oh,
Yay.
good for you. Good for you.
And Sparkle actually has a left and right on the flat,
Super.
on the
On the
flat,
flat, yeah.
in a turn, in a circle
Super.
spin. Okay. Anything else? Monica, please watch the leash handling if you can get to it.
I will definitely watch it before next week. So Betty is going to start the intro to odor next week.
Yes.
And that is 6 weeks, I think.
Yes.
Just slightly off kilter with this, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I know we have booked 12 to 2, but she won't get a turn. So everybody should be aware. We will hopefully be a little bit quicker without her taking a turn.
Right. And that is why I said that we could go to 11 o'clock, wasn't it? Just to give me a longer break in between.
Yes, because you are going to be teaching that night.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that is a real class. It's not like nice friends who I can put up with me falling asleep. Okay. So are you guys okay with the next 2 classes being 11 o'clock? So the 3rd and the 10th is 11 o'clock. And then starting on the 31st, that is the reason why those should be 11 o'clock as well, just to give me, for again, 3 weeks, a longer break.
Works for me.
Okay, I am doing
11 works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am doing a little bit too much, I don't want to say too much teaching. I keep wanting to add classes in because I keep getting excited about things. But yeah, okay. So I will change that to 11 and I will change, oops, where are we? This one to 11 as well. Go ahead. I heard an intake of breath.
Well, I was just going to say, so I'm going to write it down as 11 to 1 and we'll just see how much time it takes. And I don't know at what point she will have picked up enough on odor to come and work with us. Like, so all of that we'll have to balance and see.
Yeah. And I think that, I think for her, that will happen fairly quickly. Yeah.
Either that or not at all. Like if she does one or the other, right? Either she's like, I get it.
Right.
And she's like, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I can't imagine it. It doesn't work. Like she's not consistent. Yeah. She doesn't learn sort of, as gradually as some of my other dogs have.
Okay, okay.
Hmm.
So
Just-
either she
And
learns
Monica,
in
that's
one,
through,
Sorry?
Monica, that's through the classes in Salmon Arm that you're, or Armstrong, that you're doing the intro?
No, Jean she's below me on my screen.
here.
Yeah. Jean is doing online intro to odor for the very
Oh, I see.
first intro to odor. And so our 3 boys are all on odor, but Betty isn't. And so I said, maybe rather than trying to divide the class we do with the 3 guys and then teaching her somehow to get onto odor on the side, I'm just going to take Jean's class and get her onto odor. And then, as I said, depending on how that works, she may join us again once she's on odor. It may all be, she's very good at taking on challenge. She likes it. But if it takes her longer or whatever, then she has this other venue with other newbie dogs she could just go through.
Yeah, cool.
So, yes.
So are the 2 of you okay then with my still working with both Jasper and Tanner?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yes. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep, I will just have Jack for however long.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you know anybody, Margaret, who wants to do an intro to odor, i.e. hasn't done odor, feel free to tell them that I'm running an online class on Wednesday nights, starting on the third, because I do have space in it, because I put some criteria out. And I had 2 people who went, whoa, I haven't done anything like that. We've only ever searched in the basement. It's like, yeah, you can't do it then. I want
Huh.
fairly resilient dogs to
Yeah.
start
Okay.
odor. So if you know anybody that is looking, I've got at least 2 spaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think, unless you have a different opinion, which I'm very open to, Terry and Catherine have, okay, in a while, they're going to have one last set before the summer ends. We're not finished this set yet. And actually, I'll be on odor with you before they do it, but it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So they have one more set, and I was trying to decide whether or not to sign up for that. I do that Tuesday night.
Mm.
And so I was just processing that. I haven't quite decided, but my feeling is it's the proofing thing. It gets them out. They work with somebody else's odors. They work, even if they set things up differently than you do, because we had cream cheese everywhere yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, like it, I think probably that aspect of it is worthwhile. And I now need to go somewhere else. I need to take lessons somewhere else with Jack, because now if I get him out of the car, Margaret, he drags me to the door, because it is so highly rewarding to go to that facility, right?
Hmm.
So that's good. That's where this all started.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's so cool, Monica, that's where Jack is now. That's awesome. And I was thinking the same thing. It would be so good to have different venues for the guys. And just as an interesting note, that instructor that you and I were looking at
Yes.
as a possibility,
Yeah.
I believe she only uses odor. So a different philosophy that I'm not sure that I want to cross into.
Isn't that
no,
what we did with Jelly essentially too? We started with odor.
Yeah. So no pairing, no working with primary, just go and sniff. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose what we could maybe do with Jean is we could maybe not next week with leash handling, because that will be a shit show on its own. I can tell you, because I do that once a week. It's pretty sad. Maybe we could set some of the lessons up with Jean where she says, okay, let's meet at this kind of place or that kind of place.
Yeah.
Right? And you and I could meet. And I mean, I'll set up a hot spot, whatever. I'm pretty sure the phone will hold that connection for an hour or whatever. So we could try and take it on the road a bit. And it's just another thing we could do.
Yeah, that would be good. And one of the places in the webinar today, she was at a picnic site, and I was thinking, oh, cool, like the Mission Green Park, they have picnic sites
They do,
along
yeah.
there. So we could do that because dogs are allowed there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we could think about that. I know that I'm leery, I'm somewhat leery to do it with Jack on my own. Because I know it will drive his stress level up. And so, so that becomes part of my issue. So if we were both there and we could take turns, and then there's also someone to say, that looked like a stress reaction. Was it or wasn't it? Or how do we get? So I have to admit, because he shut down on me once, I'm probably more sensitive to just going out. Whereas Betty, I'm pretty sure I could put a box anywhere. She's going for the boxes.
Yeah, one of the huge things with my continuing class, which I don't know, someday we'll be able to drive again and someday it will continue, is that going everywhere. And we go somewhere different, or we went somewhere different every week. And Lois and Letty struggled initially, and Lois finally said, you know what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring 5 or 6 boxes every week. And she came to the location and had Letty search for odor plus food in boxes.
Yeah.
And Letty is probably now one of the strongest nose-work dogs we have, because she got through all that environmental stuff that she was finding very overwhelming. She was not ready to go search for paired birch at the front of Deb Shamara's house with all the gust smells around it. She was not prepared to go to Trowel-X, and I mean, we basically don't go to Trowel-X, we use their yard. So it's like old crap all over. She wasn't prepared for that. But to go and search boxes there, she could do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes good.
Yeah, so that might be, if we do that, you might want to include Betty. And just do boxes. Yeah. And just do very simple boxes, just a few close to where you are, or Jack. You might want to include Jack. You do want to include Jack and do it with boxes rather than what Tanner and Jasper might be doing, which is actually search. Not that they're not searches, but they're environmental searches. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you really want that this game can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Glenda and I were talking about that yesterday. Because we had barn hunt here this weekend. I'm watching my nosework numbers go way down as everybody digs barn hunt. And it's like, I'm sure barn hunt is great. I don't have room in my brain for another sport. But she said that one of the things she's found with cricket is that cricket is very worried about everything. Like she couldn't go to a park with cricket and do a search. And even coming into the barn, cricket was worried about the barn a little bit initially. And so we talked about that. Just get 3 boxes, put them outside the car and do them everywhere if you want cricket to do nose work. It's that same concept. And it's something that, and I know what she said, and that cricket does a lot of, I think it's cricket, stress peeing. So as soon as she's stressed, she pees, and she peed in the barn right away. And Gail McCarthy's line is, if you want to get rid of that, you do really simple searches, 3 boxes, in an area that is where dogs are, where there may be other dog smell, if that's where the marking is coming from. If you think it's coming from stress, then you just keep it really close to your vehicle, and you just make odor so important that the stress starts to go away. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Leash handling class next week.
Yep.
And have fun. If you get time to practice, that's great. If you don't, that's great. Do you need me to put on the Facebook group what you need to bring for the leash handling practice?
Yes. Please.
Okay. So just stuff that's hard to get around. Yeah. So even if you had if you had a bicycle, that had a stand on it, so you could put, we don't want it to fall over on the dogs, but just so that it's something you need to think about how to get around. Yeah.
It's funny you say that, Jean, because that's exactly what I was thinking about. If we are at our house, I was thinking, one of Barry's bikes on his work stand for the bikes, because the bike will not fall over.
Yes.
But bikes are hard to get around sometimes. So
yes, they're really hard on the leash.
Yeah, let's do your side. It's my turn to come your way, Margaret.
Okay.
Tables and chairs are always good too, just because the backs of the chairs and the dogs can go under the tables.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
See you guys next week. Happy
Yep.
talking on the spring fling. I will post this when it uploads.
Okay.
Thank you, Jean.
Thanks,
Take
Jean.
care.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.